I just gave these cattle their breakfast here in about maybe about a week. I'm taking a look around at local markets and seeing if I can find a good set of calves somewhere. And if I can find myself a good set of calves, I'll be expanding my herd probably within 2 weeks or so. And the animals that I have at the preconditioning farm, they're about good to go. I was taking a look at them this morning, and they're getting pretty big. I would say they're getting pretty close to about 400 pounds for the biggest ones. The biggest ones are probably about 400 pounds, and the smallest one probably about 3¼ and the biggest one maybe about 4¼ So they're pretty much good to go. I don't think I'm gonna have any problems with them. I can probably just leave them out here and precondition more calves, take more animals to the preconditioning area. And so today I figured I would talk more about the business plan and the whole thing about everything that I got going on. Okay. And so the whole thing about, okay, so I have money that I have put away, right? I have money that I have in the animals, and that is my money. And that money, it's my money, okay? And so what I do with that money, right? When I invest my money into these cattle and I purchase these animals at their equitable evaluations, and I do that, right? When I do that, it's like putting money in a savings account. I see it like putting money in a savings account. So I have money in my cattle herd, right? I have money in my cattle herd. That is my money. Once I have done that and I have money in my savings account, I take a look at it and then I leverage against it. All right. And so when I do that, why would I do that? All right. And how do I do that? The reason that I do that is so I can increase the number of animals that I am running at the same time. I can appreciate more assets at the same time. I can effectively just increase the amount of money that I am bringing home on a monthly basis. And here's the thing. Here's the big, here's one of the things that I am having to figure out right now. Okay, well, I'll go into the reasoning behind these things first, and then I'll go further into, one of the things that I'm looking at right now in terms of a problem, in terms of something that I'm looking to figure out. So when I have these 60 animals, right? Let's say I have 60 animals. Here within about 4 months, I'll have about 60 animals. I am honestly considering taking these animals up to about 900 or 1,000 pounds, just because I have such a large amount of land area. And for me to grow, and I've talked about the whole idea of growing grass using urea as the baseline. Effectively, urea is about 50% fertilizer, or it's about 50%, 50% fertilizer. And so for every 100 pounds of urea, you effectively have 50 units of fertilizer. And more or less a very reasonable estimate on a majority of grass. If you're grazing it, okay, if you're harvesting it for hay, it's going to be different. If you're just growing your grass to just have a green yard, it's going to be different. But if you're growing grass to graze it, you're effectively going to need about 400 units of fertilizer, right? It's a reasonable estimate. You'll need about 400 units of fertilizer over an 8-month period. And if we consider just use urea as the baseline for fertilizer, and then consider urea as a 50 units of fertilizer, 1 tonnage of urea is effectively 1,000 units of fertilizer, right? Because it's 50% fertilizer. And so if you have 10 acres and you need 400 units of fertilizer per acre, then on 10 acres you need 4,000 units, right? And if you need 4,000 units of fertilizer, more or less it's about 4,000 units of fertilizer on 100 on 10 acres of land. You'll need about 400 units of fertilizer. And if 1 tonnage of urea is 100 units of fertilizer, then you need 4 tonnages of urea, not urea. And I'm only using urea as a baseline. I'm not saying go and put 4 tons of urea on your grass, okay? I'm not saying that. I'm just using urea as a baseline to get an estimate for the cost. And urea is effectively 50% fertilizer. And I understand that urea is just straight nitrogen. I'm not saying put straight urea on your grass. I'm just using it as a reasonable estimate to get an estimate for how much it's all going to cost and how much I will need to use in terms of a total units of fertilizer. So think about it like I need 4 tonnages of fertilizer, not urea, but 4 tonnages of commercial fertilizer, of agricultural fertilizer. I'll need 4 tonnages of it to grow 10 acres of grass. Well, 4 tonnages of fertilizer is like $2,400, right? It's like $2,500. Let's include gas, $2,600. So if it's $2,600 over 8 months, right? What does that even turn out to be? It's like $350 a month, right? And this is what I've been saying, right? And let's say that I need to grow 20 acres of grass, or let's say I don't need to. Let's just say I decide to grow 20 acres of grass because my animals are getting real heavy and they're eating more, and I want to make sure that they just have an unlimited access to food. So it would be $700 a month. Okay, that's a very reason. It would be like $700 a month, and let's say I use 1.5, 1.5 little containers of herbicide, and a container of herbicide is like $120. So that's effectively just to say another $200. So I'd be using like $900 a month to feed 40, 50 real big animals, like 800-pound cattle. Okay, it doesn't cost a lot. Growing grass is almost free. But that's how I calculate the cost of my grass, right? And that's how I calculate the cost of my grass. I convert all of the fertilizer that I will need to use into just what I call a unit of fertilizer. That's, I use a measurement that I just call a unit of fertilizer, and urea is effectively the baseline for the commodity fertilizer, right? Urea is effectively just the baseline for it, and urea is more or less 50% fertilizer. It's 47% nitrogen. Just think about it like 50%, okay? So half of it is effectively fertilizer, and I'm not saying go and put straight urea on your field. I'm just using it as an example so that I can get an idea for the cost, all right? Realistically, if you mix urea with like a phosphorus and potassium and sulfur, it'll actually reduce the cost of your fertilizer. It'll be cheaper than urea, but more or less it just it'll be about 10 or 15% cheaper than buying straight urea. And you don't need, chances are you don't need straight urea, okay? Chances are you don't, okay? Urea straight nitrogen. I'm just saying we're going to use urea as an example. All right, because it's 47% nitrogen. It's effectively half of it is fertilizer, and so 100 pounds is 50 units of fertilizer. Okay, and so growing grass. That's how I calculate the cost of me growing grass. I convert everything into a unit of fertilizer. Then I use urea as the baseline for the price. And then I just do the multiplication, and it's very simple. It's actually so simple that even I can do it in my head, okay? If I need 4,000 units of fertilizer, if I need 4,000 units of fertilizer, then I need 4 tonnages of urea, all right? That's 8,000 pounds of urea, and that'll give me 4,000. And I'm not saying I need 8,000 pounds of fertilizer. I'm gonna stop saying urea so that you don't get confused. I need 8,000 pounds of commercial fertilizer. That's effectively 50% fertilizer, okay? And that would cost me, it's whatever, right? I mean, when it's all said and done, it's going to cost me like whatever, $2,700. Divide that by 8. I don't even know what that comes out to be. It's not even $400, all right? And let's say, with the animals being real big, I got whatever. Let's say with the animals being real big, I've decided that I want to grow 20 acres of grass. Well, then just double it, right? Because I just calculated the cost for 10 acres. And so, but here's the thing with the business plan and, the whole idea of the business plan and what I see going forward. So the 120 grand, let's just say it's 120 grand or whatever, you can think about it like whatever, 60 cattle that I've been raising for 3 or 4 months, and now they're, they've gone up in value, and I realistically can, raise the value of the animals even more, whatever it may be. And, so let's say, the 120 grand, the 120 grand is effectively just a safety margin for me. It's the money that I'm sitting on because it's whatever, right? I mean, it's good to have a little bit of money. Okay. It's good to have a little bit of money. And so that's just the money that I got sitting there in the animals, right? That's my money. And so I leverage against 80% of it, okay? And when I leverage against 80% of it, that effectively puts me in a situation where even if the, and here's the thing, and because here's a reality sense, and I've been talking about, if I don't want to be put in a situation where it's like I have to pay back money and I don't have the money if it ever happens, just whatever. I'm just covering my own backside, okay? I don't ever want to be in the negative financially. I just don't see it as a good thing. But here's the thing, and here's something that I've been thinking about, that if I take a loan against my balance sheet and I go to the, let's say I go to the bank and I take a loan, right? And I buy, with the money that I get from the bank, I get myself more cattle and I purchase these animals. I purchase commodity type animals at their equitable evaluations, right? Let's say I do that. So when I do that, technically, if I needed to pay the bank back, I could just liquidate the animals that the bank lent me money for and just pay the bank back with that money. And so, but here's the thing, and here's one way that I was thinking about it. If I have my 120 grand and I have whatever 90 grand that I borrowed from the bank, so that's 200 grand. Let's just say, let's talk about it in terms of cattle. I have 60 animals, but I took a loan at the bank, and the 60 animals that I currently have will have gone up in value. And the only time that I ever leverage against my assets is when the animals are stable, right? When I have a stabilized set of animals, I will then leverage against my herd, right? That's when I leverage against my herd. And so, so I have the stabilized herd, and I'm looking to leverage against them, right? And so when I leverage against them, the 60 animals that I already have will have already gone up in value, and they would have probably gone up in value pretty significantly, okay? And so if I go to the bank and I take a loan for 48 animals, I have 60 animals and I take a loan for 48. The 48 animals, this is also what I mean by the money that I make on a monthly basis will include the money that I make from the profit off of the bank money, off of the bank's money. So it's not me just making money off of my money. It's me also making money off of the bank's money. And I understand that I owe the bank money. But here's the thing, that let's say I owe the bank money, right? But I have a 20% positive net equity evaluation. So I can pay the bank even if I had to use my own money. Right? I didn't go and liquidate the animals that the bank lent me money for. I liquidated my own animals, right? Because, the whole thing about buying, equitable assets at their equitable evaluation and, buying a good asset, right? I've always said buy a good asset, don't buy some worthless asset. The whole thing about it is that I took the debt and I purchased something that is as valuable as the money. So in all honesty, if I had to pay the bank back, I could just sell the assets that the bank lent me money for and just pay the bank back. I don't even have to use my own money, right? This is something that I was thinking about, and I was like, maybe I should use more leverage. Maybe I should use more leverage, because if I have 60 animals and those 60 animals have gone up in value, they would have gone up in value pretty significantly. They may even be worth the, 80 or 90 animals worth of money, right? And if I take a loan for 48 animals and I have, and I have 80 animals worth of, 90 animals worth of money, that's barely 50% leverage on my balance sheet. I will probably have to use more leverage. I may even have to use like 75% more leverage, to honestly keep my balance sheet at a 80% leverage. And also but that's the thing, it's like when I take a look at it, if I'm 80% leveraged, when I am 80% leveraged and I have my 120 grand sitting there, and I'm 80% leveraged against it, and I'm making whatever, right? I'm making myself $40,000 a month. Let's say I make myself $50,000 a month. I may still owe I consider that $50,000 a month to just be my own money, because at the end of the day, if it comes down to it, I can pay the bank back at any time. The money that I have sitting there, it's not really it's there as like a safety buffer. It's there as a safety buffer, and if I ever need money, I can use the money. And I was actually very fortunate, like this, I had the 50 cattle and, and et cetera, and I had the net positive equity evaluation, and I had, tens of thousands, well, I mean, it would have been over 100 grand, and I'm very fortunate that I had that money sitting there, because if I did not have that money sitting there, I could not have used that equity. And the whole thing about using the equity to access capital, I didn't, in the future, I probably won't do that again. But I am glad that I did it this time around. The whole thing about, like, when you go and do something, this is something I talk about, like, when you go and do something, don't be an idiot, right? I mean, like, if someone's going to lend you their land, I've always said, like, when you make a deal with somebody, give them a gift. Always, okay? Just trust me, or not even trust me. It's just, but present them a gift. Don't just show up empty-handed and say thank you for letting me use your property. Like me, when I got on this property, the very first thing that I did was fix all of the fence. The neighbor across the street was actually complaining that, and the guy who was leasing this property, the reason that he didn't have any cattle on this property was because his cattle were escaping. His cattle were getting out in the front. And the neighbor across the road actually told me that. They actually just flat out told me, the cattle escaped the front right here. And, but me, when I first got here, that's the very first, I didn't even talk to the neighbor at that, I didn't even know, but I took a look at it and I realized the fence needs work. And the gates need work too. The guy had just tied up some sheet metal to the front with some rope. All right, it's borderline. It's like, are you dumb? Is something wrong with you? Why would you do that, right? So I installed new gates and I fixed all of the fencing. That's the very first thing that I did. And then present them, and and then they gave me the contract. Okay, they gave me, give something. Don't just be a taker, okay? Don't just be a taker. Give them something, right? Thank you for leasing me your property. I fixed all of your gates for you, and I fixed all of your fence, and I would also like to just give you a 10%. I would like to just give you 10% of what I make on your land. I would like to give you that. Don't just be a taker, okay? Just take. Don't take from people, okay? Give them something in return, okay? Don't be a taker. All right, offer something in return. I fixed all of your fences. I fixed all of your gates, and I would like to give you 10% of what I make on your land. What does it matter to me? It doesn't. Okay, I make a large excess of money. This is something, I make a large excess of money over the next 4 months. I will end up with like when I realistically look at it, I may even end up with like 150 grand. I've been saying 75, 100, but the more that I look at it and the more I consider these things, I may legitimately end up with like 150 grand over the next 4 months. And that would just be my money in the deal. All right, that would just be my money. That would be how much money I have sitting there. That's not even going to include the amount of money that I make on a monthly basis. But that's the thing. It's like the money that I make on a monthly basis. Like, if I have 120 grand, right? Let's say I have 120 grand, and I go to the bank and I take a loan for another 90. So now I'm all in 210. And with that 210 animals, or excuse me, with that $210,000, I managed to make, let's just say whatever, right? I make a 20% return, okay? So I'm effectively making about 40 grand a month. That 40 grand a month, I understand that I owe the bank money, but at the end of the day, if I owe I could pay the bank back with my own money. I don't care, right? I mean, I have a 20% net positive, and it's probably even more than that. It's probably like a 50% net positive, right? It's probably like a 50% net positive, okay? If I have 60 animals and I take a loan, I have 60 animals, and those animals are worth about 90 animals worth of money, and I go to the bank and I take a loan for, let's just say 45 to make the numbers easy, then I'm only 50% leveraged. And here's the thing, those 45 animals, if all of them, actually, this is a very realistic way to look at it, if all of them dropped dead instantaneously, I could still pay the bank back and have money left over. That's actually the most reasonable way to look at it. Those 45 animals will continue to go up in value, granted that I do my part. So there will be a larger amount of net positive equity gain. And the amount of money that I make on top of the bank's money is my money. That's my money. I don't pay that back to the bank. I pay interest to the bank, and the net profits that I make on the money, I keep all of it. All right. So, very realistically, but that's the whole idea of the unrealized gain. I have my money, right? I have my money in the deal. I leverage against it to get the bank's money. And then when I have my money and the bank's money in the deal, I am appreciating more assets at the same time. I'm not going to be liquidating all of the assets at the same time. If I have 105 animals and I liquidate 15 animals, my 15 biggest animals, and let's say I liquidate them at 1,000 pounds, I'd make like 33 grand, or excuse me, I'd make like 40, like 50 grand, right? If I liquidate at 1,000 pounds, I would make like, on a set of number one type steers, I'd make like, I don't even know, like 45, 50 grand. These 1,000 pound steers are selling for like $3.20. That's $3,200. Even after commissions, let's just say whatever. Let's just lowball it at 3 grand. And at 3 grand an animal, at 15 animals, that's $45,000, right? And I also still have the 90 animals at home, and those 90 animals that I have at home will have gone up in value, right? I have my money in the deal and I have the bank's money in the deal. I'm appreciating more assets at the same time. Those 90 animals probably have another $45,000 worth of value that they have gained. All right, if I sold all 90 of my animals, I would probably, number one, I would end up with all of my money, and then I would end up with another 45 grand on top of that. Okay, that's the unrealized gain. And if I want to utilize that, but that's also part of the safety buffer, right? And I will probably have to end up using more leverage. If I realistically want to keep my balance sheet, somewhat, optimally leveraged. But the amount of money that I'm making is becoming so large. It's becoming so large, that it's I'm gonna have to figure out what I'm gonna do. The amount of money that I'm making is so large that it's just, and just to put things in realistic perspective, right? I've always said that money's not an opinion. Nobody cares about an opinion. If you have a bunch of opinions and you have nothing to show for it, are you not even ashamed of yourself? All right, are you, you're borderline pathetic. You're almost homeless. Nobody cares what you think. All right, money's not an opinion. All right, and at the end of the day, I make a lot of money. All right, it just is what it is, okay? It's a statement of a fact. And so, when I take a look at all this, if I have $120,000, right, just sitting there, and I take a loan for another 90 grand, and and et cetera, and I managed to make myself, and I'm netting myself, let's say $100,000 a month. I would reasonably end up netting myself about, $100,000 a month within maybe 8 or 9 months. Even today, even right now, I may legitimately end up netting myself about 150 grand over the next 3-4 months. And so, even today, even right now, I may I will probably end up netting myself about $150,000 in just the next 3 or 4 months, something like that, $150,000, even right now when I take a look at it, okay? Like right this moment, over the next 4 months, I'll probably end up netting myself almost 150 grand. 100, somewhere between, let's just say 100 and 150 grand. I'm actually moving up the estimates from 75, 100 to about 100 to 150. And so, the money that I make in this situation on a monthly basis, I consider it all to be my money. Just, that's how I think about it. Simply because if it came down to it, I could pay the bank back all of their money. I could pay the bank back, okay? It doesn't matter. I could pay the bank back. Even, I could pay the bank back and I would still have money left over, okay? So the money that I make on a monthly basis, I just consider it all my money, and I use it, okay? But here's the thing. And if I have 80 animals, let's say I sell 45 animals, and let's say I sell 15 animals, excuse me. Let's say I sell 15 animals and I make enough money to buy 30. If I sell 15 animals and I make enough money to buy 30, let's say I sell my 15 animals and let's say I make 45 grand. Okay, 3,000 an animal. I sold them at 1,000 pounds and I made a 3,000 an animal. That'd be $45,000, right? And so I sold my 15 and I made enough money to buy 30. So my 30 animals, I would have to buy them for $1,500 a piece, okay? And if I buy them small, $1,500 is plenty of money to buy. And realistically, if I was going to spend $1,500 an animal, I'd more or less be buying straight number one type animals. And so, and if I was buying straight number one type animals, these animals would probably sell for closer to, 3,200. For number one type steers, they would probably sell closer to $3,200, $3,300, $3,400. Whatever, let's lowball it. So I sold my 15, I made 45 grand, and with that 45 grand, I'm going to go and I'm going to buy myself 30 animals. So, so I'll be spending $1,500 an animal. If I spend $1,500 an animal and I reinvest my 45 grand, that 45 grand is still there, right? I did not spend the money. I took the money and I invested the money back into assets, and the assets are worth the money. So I have my 45 grand sitting there, but I also have my 120 grand that I initially started with just sitting there on my herd, and the rest of the 90 animals will have probably gone up by another $45,000 as well. Those 90 animals will have effectively gone up by, if I sold all of the animals, I would make my 120 grand back, and I would probably make myself another 45 grand, right? And, realistically, the next month I'll have another 15 animals ready for sale. If I'm selling animals, 15 animals at a time, and I have 105 animals, and I'd be selling a set of animals every 6 months, right? I realistically have another set of animals that are effectively almost ready to go too, and they'll be ready to go the next month. I have another set of animals that will be ready for the next month. I have one set of animals that's, ready the next month, right? And so, if you stagger it all out, it's effectively twice, it's effectively just double the amount of money that I make, in terms of the check. So I sold my 15 animals. I still have 90 animals at home. I'm sitting there with a $45,000 check in my hand. I take a look at my herd and I say, well, I still have $120,000 worth of my own money in the herd. And this herd, if I liquidated all of my animals today, I would probably, make a net profit of about another 45 grand. And I would make my $120,000 back, right? And so that's effectively like I have, $205,000 worth of money, right? I have roughly $205,000 worth of money, right? And if I have $205,000 worth of money and I only take a loan for 45 grand, that's 25% leverage. That's not good, okay? That's not good. And let's just say it's 25% leverage, and then I have another 25% leverage in the herd, okay? Let's say, I got $200,000 worth of money, and I owe the bank $100,000. So let's say I got whatever, that would be let's say I got $200,000 worth of my own money in the herd, and then I owe the bank another $100,000. So if I took a loan right then for another 50 grand, that would only push up the amount of leverage that I have on my balance sheet to 50%. I would only be 50% leveraged, and that's not exactly an ideal situation. So I am considering the idea of using more leverage. All right, I am considering it. I will probably have to start leveraging against the unrealized gain values as well. This is something that I will probably have to start leveraging against the unrealized gains and start leveraging against the total equity valuation of my herd instead of the number of animals that I have, right? I was talking about, up until now, it was, if I just leveraged against the number of animals that I have, it was very easy and it was very simple. But just simply because the number of animals that I have right now has become so large, the size of my herd is becoming so large that if I do not leverage against the equitable evaluation of the herd, I will effectively, if I just, but I can figure out another simple way to do it. Maybe I leverage a 2-for-1 or something. If I have $120,000 sitting in my herd, and I make myself $45,000, and I have 80% leverage on my herd, on the 120,000, and the total net equitable evaluation of my herd is another excess of 45 grand. Then realistically, I have $205,000 of my own money in the herd. Not my own money, but I have $205,000 worth of my equity in the deal. I owe the bank 100 grand, and I just made another, and so, and I made that 50 grand. And so I'm a leverage against the money. I will have to consider an idea for how I will use more leverage. But, that's the thing. That's what I got going on right now. Within about 4 months, I will have about somewhere around 150 grand, somewhere around 150 grand worth of my own money in the deal. And if I have 150 grand worth of my own money in the deal, and I take a loan against it, that'll effectively, but that's the whole thing, right? I leverage against my assets to raise my monthly income, right? That's why I do it, to raise the amount of money that I make on a monthly basis. And if I raise the amount of money that I make on a monthly basis, even though by using a loan, even though I do that, my equity, my money in the deal far exceeds the amount of money that the bank has given me. And so, I just consider that monthly income. I just consider that the amount of money that I make on a monthly basis. I just consider that all more or less to be my money. Because if it came down to it, I could pay the bank back everything, and I would still have a lot of money left over, okay? It doesn't matter to me. I just more or less consider the amount of money that I make on a monthly basis to be my own money. Granted that I have positive equity in the herd, okay? Like if I borrow money from the bank, and I take that money and I purchase equitable assets with it, tax deductible equitable assets, and I appreciate the value of the money that they gave me. The only money that I realistically owe the bank is interest, but if they were to tell me to pay everything back, I could pay everything back and I would still have money left over. All right? I've watched like documentaries on stuff, and like people who borrowed money, and then in 2008 there was a big financial problem, subprime mortgage collapse, and the banks were calling in for loans and all sorts of, and I don't want to be a part of that, okay? If the bank ever, for whatever reason, because I will probably start, I myself will have a large amount of money in the deal, and I will leverage against it, and that will turn out to be even a larger sum of money. And I don't ever want the bank to put me in a situation where it's like I'm scrambling, right? I don't want them to hold that over my head. And so I've decided that, but I will look to leverage against about 80% of my entire sum. All right. I don't want to be sitting here with 50% leverage. That's not optimal. All right. I can do better than that. And so, but that's the big idea. I use the bank's money to increase the number of assets that I have. And the reason that I increase the number of assets that I have is so that I can appreciate more animals at the same time, which in effect raises the amount of money that I bring home on a monthly basis. If my balance sheet is in the net positive, then I consider the money that I bring home on a monthly basis to be all my money. I consider it to be all my money because at the end of the day, if it came down to it, I could pay the bank back and it won't matter. Okay. So, right now, but that's also the thing. If I did not have money saved in the equity of my herd, I would not have been able to, clear out all of this land so rapidly. I would not have been able to clear out all of this land so quickly. And, I may have lost an opportunity, right? If I did not have this money saved. And, I was able to get myself about 400 acres of land. And also, the thing about not being a moron, right? Don't just show up and go, oh, thank you, well, I'm gonna go on a magical journey on your property. Money talks, okay? Money talks. Nobody cares about your dreams. Oh my God, well, I'm gonna put my, whatever, three cows out here and go on a magical journey. I'm gonna put my 10 cows out here, and my life is gonna be a magical journey. Money talks, okay? Like, here's what I did. Like, me on this land, when I got here, the first thing that I did was fix all of the fences and put in new gates. Right? That's more or less a gift. I did that, to present my deal on the right foot. You really want to show up with the gift. This is something that, this will help you, make deals. You want to present a gift. All right, like me on my 70-acre field, that 70-acre field, I bulldozed all of the big trees in the way. I bulldozed all of it. I fixed the fence, and I put in and I mowed like 50 acres of it. Right? I didn't just show up and go, thank you for leasing me your land, and then just sit there and just do whatever, go on my magical journey. Put 5 cows out there, right? Present a gift. Give a gift, okay? Give a gift. It will help you make deals. And think about your gift. Don't give them some worthless thing. Don't give them a gift card. And don't send them a card. Don't, no gift cards. No, whatever. Okay, think about your gift. My 70-acre field, I mowed all of the grass. I bulldozed the trees. And I fixed all the fences. The owner went out there and took a look, and he really liked what he saw, right? That's a good way to present your deal. Thank you for your deal. Let me, present the gift, and then, give them a gift. Okay, give a gift. On the 190-acre field, I fixed up a bunch of the cross fencing. I bulldozed a bunch of trees, and as soon as it starts raining, I'll start herbiciding the property. All right, present them with the gift. Don't just show up and go, thank you, and now I'm just going to go on my magical journey. Nobody cares about your magical journey, okay? Die poor. All right, you really want to present a gift. But, that's the thing, very realistically, like right now, I'm probably making about $35,000, $40,000 a month. And very realistically, well, here's the thing. I'm not making $35,000, $40,000 a month. Actually, now that I think about it, here's the thing. Because the animals that I have right now, that I'm not going to make the entire sum over the next 3 or 4 months. The amount of money that I have. Here's actually a more logical way of looking. Here's a more realistic way of looking at it. The amount of money that I have in the deal for myself will be about 100 and 150 grand within the next 3 or 4 months. Because these animals, it's not like I brought them home last week. It's not that I brought them home yesterday. The amount of money that I have in the deal will be about let's just say 100 grand, just to make the numbers, just to give it a conservative estimate. 100 grand, that will be my money in the deal. I will take this money and leverage against it. And when I do that, I will more or less end up with about 105 cattle, something like that, within 4 months. And when I have 105 cattle and I'm 70, 60% leveraged, I may only be 70% leveraged, 60% leveraged, I will effectively have a net positive position of 20, and the 15 animals that I sell on a monthly basis will probably make me about, let's say 40 grand, will probably make me about 40 grand, and I will still have 90 animals left at home. Those 90 animals will probably have gone up in value by about another 40 grand. So, if I sold all of my animals right then and there, I would make my 100 grand back. I would make 40 grand on top of it, and I'm sitting there with a $40,000 check in my hand. I paid the bank back as well. That's more or less where my financials are headed. I may even get to $80,000 a month within I may even get to $80,000 a month in 5 or 6 months. Yeah, I may even legitimately get there in 5 or 6 months. It may not take me, 8, 9 months.